practice this. So on the holding camp, which there's like a 3-week camp before the Olympics, I went to the holding camp in Newport with him, and every day we practice this. So we do 20 minutes of him learning to focus, and then we had specifics on the bike for when he got on it to do this kilo. And to me, he was an excellent student, clearly. He committed to it. And he would say then that when he got on the bike and he went round the day of the Olympics, he forgot where he was until he passed the line. So to me, that's like you're in complete focus mode. So again, credit to Chris.
Why is switching off his mind in such a way, or focusing his mind in such a way, or why is that?
The neuroscience is complex, so I'm going to cut corners and do it very black and white and simplified. It's complex, but in a nutshell, there are 3 systems in your head, keeping it very simple. It's much more complex than that, but simplifying it. One of the systems will help you to think very logically, and I call that the human system. It thinks logically, but it's very slow, which means if you operate with a human, your body and your reflexes will slow down because you're analysing as you go along, and it slows the system, so you're more pensive. So that's really good in certain circumstances, but it's awful in fast-moving sports. So if he goes into that, it's very likely he'll slow down. It's not going to help him. If he goes into the second system, which we'll probably come back to, the chimp system, this is a primitive system which thinks. It's more than just a reaction and impulsive system. It thinks. When it moves, it can move at speed, but it thinks emotionally. So this is the part of his brain that will think thoughts that are not helpful, such as, should I go faster at this point? And then it may make a decision to go faster and burn out. So that would be crazy. Finally, the third system is a computer. It just needs programming. The key to the computer, particularly in sport, is it moves so fast. It's approximately 20 times quicker than the human system to execute, and it's about 4 times quicker than the chimp system. So if you get into computer mode, particularly in fast-moving sports, it doesn't analyse or think. It's automatic thinking. So it works with keys like a computer.
Is that the autopilot?
Exactly, it's an autopilot. You're programmed. It's a behaviour that's programmed in.
So when I came down the stairs to see you today, I know the route. I've done it 100 times. Yeah. So I was holding my iPad, but I was on autopilot.
Yeah.
As I came down the stairs and walked.
Your body knows what to do. You don't need to think. Whereas if we put an obstacle in there, then it will stop.
Okay.
Because it doesn't know what to do. It's not programmed.
Okay.
But you'll have to think then.
Is the computer where our habit?
But these beliefs are programmed into us, and we hold thousands of beliefs, often without knowing what they are.
Okay, we're going to come back to that because I want to talk about the gremlin, the trauma, and where all of those beliefs come from, and which ones we can resolve. But to your point then about Chris Hoy on that.
So Chris was asking in my world, he was saying, how do I silence my human and chimp systems from analysing and thinking, which is their job, and how do I go into computer mode so I forget where I am and just get on with the process? And he did this nicely. Ronnie Sullivan wasn't in that place. And again, Ronnie's given me permission. He keeps saying, tell everybody everything, but I won't tell you everything. A lot of stuff is behind locked doors. So he's a great guy. I love Ronnie Sullivan. We've been friends now for over 10 years. So it's a privilege to work with him. He's one of the hardest working of my students. And he's saying to me all the time, he rings regularly. So I've spoken to him already yesterday. So we talk. But the key to Ronnie was, his chimp was so active in being anxious about how he came across, whether he'd perform well, what people would say, how well his rivals might be doing. It was just giving him what is natural and healthy, but extremely unhelpful. And that was creating very anxious moments. So before I met him, I had a look, because I didn't know anything about Ronnie or snooker, and I went online to say, can I see some YouTubes of him? And I saw him hitting the white ball with the cue stick, and I thought, well, obviously that's not the right thing to be doing. And I saw him walk out of a competition, which distressed me. You know, I didn't know the guy, but I thought, wow, the emotion that guy was getting at that point must have been so unpleasant that partway through a World Championships competition, he just suddenly stopped, froze, shook hands and walked out. And I just thought, you know, when I saw that, I definitely want to help this man. And we went back and actually looked at that incident, and I said, what was it? And I love this. And he challenged me at the beginning, but after about an hour of chatting, he said, I get this. Because on that incident, he said to me, there was this voice sort of saying, just go out of it, you don't have to be, I don't want to be here. And he said, and I'm saying to myself, I want to play snooker. I just want to enjoy the game. And this voice got more strong, saying, right, hit the cue. And he said, I hit the cue ball. And he said, I'm walking out. And the voice is still going, right, just keep walking. We're out of here. I can't deal with this. And he said, now I get it. There were two of me. There was me trying to do what I want, and there's this voice which I couldn't manage at all. And I couldn't stop it doing what it wanted to do. So once I explained the model to him, and the model isn't for everyone, it's for those who can relate to it. He said, I get this because my human system, my chimp system are so different. They're poles apart. So he's worked for 10 years saying, how do I recognise and manage this chimp system? So when he came to me, it wasn't just in snooker, his whole life. He could see that his emotions were getting the better of him, and it was a whole system that was emotionally driven, and it was almost paranoid about things. It was defensive, it was making him feel vulnerable, it was giving him anxiety, and it's a really powerful system. So it varies in person to person. Some people have very simple chimp systems which are not that strong, and others, most of us, have chimp systems we really recognise they're there and they mean business. And they give us emotions which drive us to do things, make decisions, have behaviours that often are destructive, not just unconstructive.
So in Ronnie's case, what do you do?
Right, we started again to recognise the systems and say, right, let's just start, because again, I tried to take people through a series of steps rather than just throw things at them. And so the very first step is, let's define who you are, and let's define what your chimp is like. So we recognise, because everyone's unique, so I can't tell you who you are, know what your system is. I'll give you general things like, this system is impulsive, it doesn't think of consequence, it's quite emotionally driven. When we're tired, it takes over. And people generally start, I get that. So neuroscientifically, that's what happens in the brain. So how do we start to recognise the difference? And then when we do, let's start simply to say, what is it that's prodding my chimp into action? And this is where it gets a little more complex. The chimp system can just react. So if I, for example, you're friends with me and one day I just shout at you for some reason and get annoyed, and your chimp system is most likely going to shout back. But if it believes I'm not as good as other people or I can't cope, it's likely to go quiet and feel very intimidated and hurt. So again, we have to work out what your chimp system is doing. But on the other hand, the chimp system, the neuroscience is, it always turns to the computer and says, what beliefs do I hold before I make my decision? And this happens in a fifth of a second. So let's say you're about to shout back at me and your chimp looks into the computer, and one of your beliefs, I don't know what they are, might be, if you shout back at people, it makes you look foolish.
Yeah, well, I can tell you what my beliefs are.
Right.
And I can tell you where they came from. So my parents my parents had a very loud shouting relationship. I've never shouted in my life because of that. Because I learned firsthand.
So what's your belief?
My belief is that shouting achieves nothing. It's harmful for both parties. You lose when you do it. You're not heard when you do it.
No, you stop there, stop and do. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So just to try and do to steady with this, is what you're saying to me is, I absolutely resonate with these beliefs. They're not something I've given you, which is a danger. So if I said to you, we're going to try and stop you shouting, it never gets you anywhere. You have to resonate with that. That's why I can't do it. You have to say to me, Steve, that really resonates.
I've got to have evidence.
Yes.
Yeah. And
you have to believe this. And you can't brainwash yourself into believing. You've got to experience it and say, this rings true to me. So once you've worked that out and you reinforced it, which it sounds like you've done through your life,
oh God, yeah,
then you don't shout. And it's not that you can't, it's your computer stopping you, because the chimp has to listen to those beliefs. So before it does anything, it can't move.
So let's look at the opposite then. If someone had, if someone grew up in a household where they were shouting and they for whatever reason gained the evidence that it was an effective way to communicate or whatever, how does someone go about unprogramming that belief?
Well, it's not my job to do that. Okay. So I'll explain what I mean. I agree with you. To me, shouting is not very helpful, at all. However, if somebody, that's not my job to tell people. I say to them, why would you hold that belief? And I do have people who say it because people don't listen unless you shout. Some people, you have to shout at them. And so I draw breath because obviously I'm not agreeing, but I'm not going to try and change the mind. I'm going to challenge them and say, can we challenge that to make sure that's what you believe? But if they're insistent, there are certain people in my life that shouting works for. It's not for me to say that. What I would do then is say, right, let's say it does work. That's in the short term. So now we're in the devil in the detail. Our chimp system is working in the short term. It does not look at long-term consequence. So when your human now comes in, your human system will look at rationality and say, what's the long-term consequence of me shouting? Now it may be with person A, there's no long-term consequence. And you think, it doesn't make any difference, I'm going to shout, right? They get it. And we're okay with that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm saying it's what they want to do. However, they might suddenly say with me, actually you're right, with person B when I shout, there is repercussion on the person and I'm actually hurting them. And also, in their eyes, it's demeaning. They see me as demeaning myself. So it's not actually working in the long term. It's not building a relationship that I want. So it can be, you tease the devil in the detail out. You have a blanket, by the sound of it, belief that it doesn't matter who it is, you don't shout.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. However, I'm going to give you more devil in detail. You have to be careful, because if you add on to that shouting is something that's a failure, and then now I have a challenge on you. Because if you think about it, if you then suddenly out of the blue did shout, and you're going to now start beating yourself up potentially and thinking,
yeah, I would.
Yeah, so that's not that helpful. So what a better belief I would suggest, and see if you resonate, is to say, if you shout, even though you don't agree with it, because all your beliefs, in my opinion, are right, if you shout, forgive yourself and say, you know, that is a chimp system, and maybe I need to reinforce my computer system because my chimp got out there, and I'm not proud of that, because actually I don't think that helped. But I like people to understand that we can only manage the chimp system, we do not control it, and if it wants to get the better of us, it can. So all we can do is keep reinforcing the computer beliefs and strengthen them, and you've done it beautifully by having a number of beliefs. And then you've almost got this gang of autopilots. So if one gets shaken, the others come in. And that's how the brain will work. So I like more than one belief. But on the other hand, if under circumstances your chimp gets out and you shout, I want you to understand that your chimp got out, it wasn't you. That's not an excuse model. You have to apologise if you think you've done wrong. But I am saying it's a skill model, which means you say to me now, I do not want to shout, so you didn't do it. However, you're responsible. You can't just absolve yourself. So I always liken it to having a dog. I'm a great dog lover. If one of my dogs comes in here and bites you, I can't just go, it was my dog. The answer is, I have to manage this system. I have to manage my dog. And it's my responsibility, 100%. So I work with people to say, be kind to yourself, because this system means business, and whatever your system is like, it will break through. There will be days you do not manage it.
Let's pretend today has been a day where I didn't manage it. The dog got off the lead and bit somebody, whatever. You know, I lost my temper, whatever, and I'm reflecting on it, thinking, oh God, you know, an hour's passed, and I'm thinking, God, I wish I hadn't done that. What can I actively do to prevent it happening again? How do I reinforce that computer?
Let me go back to the dog, because it's probably the best example. What you wouldn't do, I hope, is kick the dog. Dog's doing what the dog does. You know, the dog doesn't know. So your job is to say, first, I'm going to apologise to the person, because that should not have happened. I know whatever I need to do, I compensate, I do whatever, and apologise. The second thing is, naturally, I assume you're going to say, well, I need to work on the dog. I need to learn to train the dog and manage it, so I know exactly how to stop that happening again. But what I'm not going to do is beat myself up for not being able to manage the dog.
Why is that a bad idea?
Beating yourself up?
Yeah. Just like, you know, oh God, I'm such an idiot, I shouldn't have done that.
It's sort of self-evident. I mean, again, this is the devil in the detail. If you said to me, you know, when I do that, it makes me feel better just to think, right, I've got to go at myself here, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm going to do is draw a line after a certain time, and then I'm going to say, right, you've had a go at yourself, get over it, let's put that into action now, right? Then I'm not disapproving. I think it's self-evident that I'm not going to approve of somebody beating themselves up and going back to the same thing over and over and over, and then escalating that. So it doesn't just become, I can't manage the dog, I'm an incompetent person. You know, and I get things wrong, and everyone else seems to do this. What's wrong with me? That's the problem. It's now going down a very dangerous route.
Is that depositing certain evidence into the computer about you not being worthy, which then is going to make your chimp respond?
Yeah, well, the chimp's going to be irrational. So when the chimp brain takes over, because it puts our beliefs in as well as we do. So it, for example, with the dog one, it will expand on that and say, well, there's something wrong with me. So let's go to you. You shouted, and then you start saying, you know, I'm not a great person. You know, because my belief is great people shouldn't be doing that, and it's okay giving an excuse in that's my chimp, but it's not good enough, and I can't allow it to happen again, and I've done damage to this person irreparably, and now you can say, oh, it's starting to escalate, and you're putting all these beliefs inside your system. So there are going to be unconscious beliefs that you're carrying with you. So then you go and meet some friend, and those beliefs might come straight in. Am I going to damage this person? Am I going to say something stupid again? Am I going to lose it again? This is all really